This is Lopan Yudron coming at you from Nakchang Gotso, the Happy Garden of Practitioners in Oakland, California. How are you doing this week? If you come on by, you can leave comments in the comments section. So today's topic is, a pertinent one to anybody who's exploring Buddhism in the present time. I'm comparing side by side a kind of secular style of Buddhism, which is quite popular these days, and then a more devotional style, going along with the traditional Buddhism, mostly Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, but also there were elements of faith and devotion in the Theravadan tradition as well. So let's get started. Secular Buddhism is a popular movement that's come along in the last, 10 years or so, emerging from earlier antecedents with probably with Stephen Batchelor's book, probably capped it off when Stephen Batchelor, who's a scholar and a former monk in a Tibetan Buddhist tradition called the Geluk tradition, kind of came out in a dramatic, splashy way with a book saying he was agnostic towards a lot of articles of faith of the Buddhist, traditional Buddhism, and created a big stir at the time. That was a long time ago, probably the 90s. And since then, it turns out that there's a large number of people in the United States and Europe primarily, but really maybe the world over, who feel a connection with that approach of subtracting from Buddhism the faith-based parts, putting it roughly, and I would say retaining the parts that make sense to them, folks with a modern style scientific mind. So they tend to draw mainly from the earliest recorded Buddhism, kind of proto-Theravadan. There were many different schools of early Buddhism, and the only remaining one of the really early form is the Theravadan school, which issued forth from Sri Lanka, off the southern coast of India. And what are some of the characteristics? Well, first of all, I want to say what are some of the commonalities we have between traditional Buddhism and secular Buddhism? Well, I would say that the concept of egolessness, anatman, the lack of a soul or a permanent self, the centrality of impermanence, the mindfulness of the cause and effect of our conduct, and they appreciate the discussion of the three poisons and as the root of our suffering. They see emotions as suffering, we all strive for some kind of awakening, however we conceive of that awakening. The Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are a refuge for all of us in different ways, and we all believe that there aren't any permanently existing gods. There's no pie in the sky great God, and there's not little gods that last forever. So that's a lot of commonality among some of the basic principles of Buddhism between secularism and what are we going to call it, everything else, traditional Buddhism from Asia. So how do we diverge? And I'm saying we because I lean in towards I'm deeply involved in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm kind of a traditionalist. I have a lot of faith and devotion kind of feelings. And what are the differences then between somebody like me and somebody who was part of this new secular Buddhism movement? the first thing comes to mind for me, which is reflected in the title of today's talk, was devotion. There's not a real feeling of devotion per se to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. There's a feeling of maybe a little to the books. These people tend to be very knowledgeable about the literature of early Buddhism and the parts of it that they find really valuable. Much more knowledgeable than I am about early Buddhism. And but this feeling of using devotion as part of the path of practice is absent in this kind of style. And another divergence is they don't believe in literal rebirth. No Buddhist believes in reincarnation in the sense of one soul going from one lifetime to another. There's a subtle difference in the Buddhist view about what that continuity is between one lifetime and the next. And even among schools of Buddhism, there are different ideas about exactly how that occurs. And the secular Buddhists tend to not believe in any kind of rebirth, or at least they're agnostic towards it. Agnostic means taking a wait and see attitude. So you're going to wait for a while, then you're going to die, then you're going to find out, and that's soon enough for them. Or until they have some confirming experience personally, I suppose. Then another point and I put the Secular Buddhist Association, which seems to be a small group of the broader secular Buddhist movement. I put a link to their principles to give you kind of feel for it in the what are they going to call the notes for today's live stream up top. So they don't believe that the Buddha was a special guy. He was special in what he accomplished in his life, like he had a great career. He became very knowledgeable of meditation, and he attained something, and it was really quite wonderful. But he was fundamentally an ordinary human guy. And all this subsequently, because of a non-belief in rebirth, all the other great figures from Buddhist history were also just regular humans like you and me, and they didn't have any past life underpinnings to their awakening in this life. And in the Mahayana traditions, there's many past lives ascribed to the Buddha, that over eons created the underlying causes and conditions that allowed him to attain liberation in this life. And then there's disbelief in the supernatural, and some belief in unseen beings is so inculcated in traditional Buddhism, including in the sutras, where gods and nagas were frequently seen in the audience, even the earliest Buddhist teachings. So there isn't any. There aren't any unseen entities, and in general, they are everything that can be determined by science. And the little statement of purpose I saw on their website of the Secular Buddhist Association, they said demonstrable things should be. We believe in what's demonstrable in the known world. So what is known to science is what they believe in, and things that seem according to scientific principles. They didn't use the word science, but they call it naturalistic principles. Then they don't. They're ranging from agnostic to disbelieving. And another big area is they remove Asian cultural aspects. So it's a very stripped down form of Buddhism that intended to appeal to a broad audience cross-culturally. And they've gotten a lot of critique for this, and it kind of pushes my buttons, I got to say, in terms of anti-racism. To think that it projects on the face of it a feeling of superiority to, we know better than those Asians. We don't need their stuff. We know what the difference is between culture and religion when it's not so obvious sometimes in a Buddhist society. But their argument is that really that people like me are appropriating an Asian heritage tradition by incorporating some things they would view as cultural. In fact, it could be argued that the very fact of me using a Tibetan name, which was given to me by my Lama, and it's common to use Tibetan, your refuge name, in Western Buddhist circles. I am appropriating Tibetan culture and disrespecting it that way. So you could go argue either way on that. I have my own thoughts about that, but that's a subject for another day. And then there's no idea, I'm going on beyond the overt list, but there's a subtext of like, lineage is not important. You can go right back and get a hot take on the sutras and decide for yourself what it means and how to implement it. And, it's fresh in the moment. Whereas in traditional Buddhism, it varies by tradition. There's many, many, many traditions in Buddhism, but there's an idea of a living tradition passed from teacher to disciple. And so that's absent in secular Buddhism. Feel free to throw a comment in the comment box. I see a couple of people there. So another idea, of course, karma is a non-starter, at least karma between lives, because if you don't believe in rebirth, then the whole Buddhist framework of gathering merit and wisdom throughout countless lives in order to attain the causes and conditions, to cultivate the accumulations that are necessary to advance on the path, and at least in the Bodhisattva way, can't happen because we're just born fresh, blank tabula rasa, as a baby in the secular way of looking at things. And then I would say, they didn't mention on there, but commonly there's a related theme of people not believing in the historicity of the Mahayana Sutras and the Tantras. And they might even not believe some of the stories around some of the early Buddhist teachings. I don't know. So that's a whole rich vein in ways we are different. So what do we gain? What is gained by a large number of people, much larger than honestly, among the general public, among many more interested in this secular Buddhism than they are in traditional Buddhism at this particular juncture in time. So it appeals broadly. It's palatable. And it's also, there's less cultural dissonance. So there's certain things about, for example, I work with Tibetan society people, and there's differences in culture. I'm not even going to name them that you can run up against. That, will push your cultural buttons and your assumptions. It'll challenge all your assumptions as from somebody coming from a American, white American society. And I'm going to say here, though, that actually secular Buddhism doesn't just appeal to white people. It is appealing to a broad variety of people from many different cultures and backgrounds. So very interesting. So those are all positives. It becomes easy to apply in our lives. It loses its off-puttingness. I would give an example to the credit of the secular people. Is I've had a Buddhist group. I made a kind of meet-up group at one point for Buddhists, invited them over to my house, and I have a Tibetan shrine in my living room. To me, it's not a Tibetan shrine because I made. Or at least I was a part of making most of the things on the shrine. They all have meaning to me in my training. But I could clearly see that it freaked out some people. it's something, it made them just really, really uncomfortable. And I don't know what that is, but it's not really there for me. I'd maybe past life, in my worldview, past life tendencies or history with Tibetan culture. Maybe I just had that. When first time I saw a traditional Tibetan temple, it was at that Kagyu retreat center in Wappingers Falls, New York. I went, yes, I love it. There was nothing even the slightest bit off-putting. It was totally alluring. But it sort of depends on your mind, whether your mind is created from this life or not, or from past lives. It's definitely a thing that some people are frightened by other cultures and traditions and colors and smells. Very scary. So so now here is, clearly I have an agenda. Just right. I feel that there's a tremendous richness in Buddhism that's lost when you strip away all the things that you don't naturally believe in, and things that don't come easily to you. You strip away all the culture, and I'm going to go through a few of them with you. Time's flying. And please, throw something in the box if you have any ideas about this. I feel that if we do a stripped down secular Buddhism, prying the Buddhist teachings out of its original context, we're losing a living connection with the people who hold these ancient traditions and lineages. In our tradition, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's said to hold blessings like an electrical current that runs from teacher to student on down through the centuries. And of course, a secular person wouldn't necessarily believe in something like that, something esoteric and weird. But but at least you could see that perhaps there's something lost with people who've been living and breathing this their whole lives. They were raised by Buddhists, and they were trained by Buddhist teachers probably in a Buddhist society, or at least a partially Buddhist society in Asia. And connection with that just is a wonderful thing that I wouldn't want to live without personally. Then all those, sort of allegorical, wild stories from the Mahayana Sutras and the Tantras, if you look at them and you dismiss them as unbelievable, and therefore to be discarded, because they have supernatural elements. I don't like the word supernatural particularly. Or they're historically, unverifiable by records or archaeological evidence. We're losing there's a whole richness in those stories that is really enhances your practice if you can open your mind to it. I'm going to give you an example. This week, our little Buddhist group, Maya Mountain Foundation, has been reading this book, this is 2 volumes actually, The Life of Padmasambhava. And this is a very early translation, so boy, it's a slog, it's hard, because it could be updated. And so I was reading this, we were reading this aloud yesterday. And let me just give you an example, So Padmasambhava is studying with Ananda, one of the disciples of the Buddha, who lived unbelievably to a long period of time, hundreds of years, right? And Padmasambhava is said to have lived hundreds and hundreds of years. And this is his legend, And so it says, he's telling the story of what are you going to do with all these sutras and commentaries? Because they were enough to, fill a house with. And Ananda said that they make to paraphrase, that you could fill up a robust elephant with all those books. And so here it goes. So since the gods and Nagas have been quarreling about where to place them, the unabridged Sada Sahasrika was concealed as a treasure in the domain of the Nagas. The Prajnaparamita in 20,000 lines was hidden in the territories of the Sakras, and that in 10,000 lines in the dwellings of the Titans, in 8,000 lines in the land of Vaishravana. And it goes on, all these different lands from China, with supernatural beings, with in Tibet, even Mount Patala. Oh, that was in India. In India, all over India, Bengal, Kashmir, Uddiyana, all the way out there where Pakistan is now, and hidden the rivers and cemeteries, the Cool Grove Cemetery. And then it concludes by saying, while the doctrine of the Buddha remains preserved in the openness, it is in the sky, in the abode of the Nagas, in the rocks, waters and trees, in the mountains, caverns, borderlands, and charnel grounds, in the monasteries, the stupas, and at Nalanda, in the regions of the Gandharvas, the Kumbhandas, the Yakshas and the Gandhras, and that the sutra have been deposited and are propagated. The world's great treasures at the mercy of kings, of robbers, of fire and water, will be reduced to nothing. But this holy treasure, this treasure of holy Dharma of the Tathagata, the Buddha, hidden thus, will remain indestructible throughout many eras. Who doesn't love that? The Dharma is written in rocks. It's written in streams. It's written in the air. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, but honestly, tears come to my eyes. It's so beautiful. Do you really want to strip that kind of thing out of Buddhism? No, not me. So another way that I think that the Buddha of devotion, faith and devotion, the Buddhism of faith and devotion has value is that art, dance, and music, which would be viewed as cultural, that emerge within a Buddhist society, within Buddhist practice. There's beautiful art. Think of that's a wonderful man making a movie about the tradition of carving wooden sculptures of the Buddha in Japan. You should look that up. Carving the Divine. He's making, I think it's maybe almost ready by now. And that whole artistic tradition, is that art? Is that cultural? Because it looks like a Japanese style Buddha? Do we then say, oh, then that's not the real Buddha. We got to take that wooden statue out of here. Get rid of that thing. Do we, then, there's the beautiful tantric dances in Tibet that the lamas learn from their teen years, how, and they're enacting the life of Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, or, many other things. Is that culture, or is that... I know one woman that said she had the greatest spiritual experience of her life doing the cham, or the lama dances, from the Tibetan culture, and a Western woman. What if she'd never been able to do that dance? Then the other thing is we miss out on, and this may sound kind of odd if you don't like having your buttons pushed, but I think as Westerners we are enriched by having our assumptions undermined. So based on whether we're from a Christian background or not, I'm not from a Christian background, I'm not from a Jewish or Muslim background, or a Buddhist background. I was raised by a spiritualist minister and an agnostic lawyer father. Yet, I have assumptions that come out of latent Christian values in our society, and also, there's nothing wrong with them, but they're there. And then also New Age beliefs. In my generation, my parents' generation, they were very influential. And it took a long time for me to even see them because they were so inlaid in my psyche. So having contact, direct contact, and having suddenly, I remember, for example, Amitar Rinpoche was giving a talk at Open Secret Bookstore in San Rafael, California. And one time when I'd been a Dharma practitioner for a couple of years, couple of 3 maybe, and I was very into it. And somebody asked a question, is it possible that I could attain enlightenment right here? Just talking to you, just right here on the spot? And I thought to myself, that's ridiculous. I know the answer to that question. You have to do your foundational practices. You have to do this, and then you have to do that, and then you attain enlightenment. And then Rinpoche said, of course it's possible. And blew my mind, right? So when you close off avenues to the lineage holders of the tradition, you're missing out on having your mind blown, as we used to say in the 60s. So also I'd say, growing up in a Buddhist culture, we shouldn't deny the impact it has. I've met a wonderful woman who is Tibetan, but she never was exposed to Dharma hardly at all, overtly, but she grew up in a Dharma society. And she's the most wonderful, kind person. Dharma is written all over her because of the cultural underpinnings. And so I would argue that has to allow Dharma culture to imbue within us its touch. The breath of Buddhism is fantastic. Feel free to comment if you want. So another thing I would say is that it just seems uptight to me. Secular Buddhism, I'm going to lay it right out there, it seems tight-ass to me. To say, it's like a person, you may be like this, and forgive me if you are, but say you get a mixture of vegetables on your plate, and you like some of them and you don't like other ones. You like the peas, but you don't like the carrots. So then you take a little fork and you pull out all the carrots and make sure that the carrots aren't, that's like a child does that, right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone. It feels like that. It feels like unrelaxed. And relaxation is key to any Buddhist path, I would argue. So, but then the counter argument would be, oh ho ho, Yudron Longmo. You are really the one who's uptight, because here we are, we're just modernizing. We're bringing it up with facts. Science is fact. Science is truth. Dharma is truth. Therefore, there's no incompatibility there. And so what are you, some uptight old fart? Why don't you get with the program? Loosen up a little bit. So the argument can go either way, right? So I would also say the feeling tone of devotion, of saying, oh, I take refuge in the Buddha, and visualizing the Buddha in front of you, or your Lama, or Tara, whoever. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. It lifts you up. It lightens up your practice and makes you imbue some joy that loosens everything up and enhances your practice, I would say. What do you think? And then I'd also say that faith, saying, oh, I take refuge in that, whatever that is, that Buddha, whatever it is that Buddha thinks, I'm into that. And going back and discovering through reading the traditional literature what Buddha thinks, on the one hand, a secular could say, that's crazy. You should grab hold of your own intellect, your own critical thinking skills. Don't go just believing something just because you think Buddha is floating in space in front of you, and he's some really supernatural being. Have faith in it because you've studied it and according to rationality, and you believe in it that way. But my argument is that believing having faith in the face of tenets that you don't naturally cotton to originally, like, for example, rebirth and karma, that are outside of our upbringing as Western disciples. Well, they wouldn't say disciples, practitioners, fosters humility, and it fosters perseverance, because you want to look again. I don't understand what Dharmakaya is yet. I want to, maybe I thought I understood it last year, but I want to keep going deeper and deeper, learning more and more. It fosters exploration, joyful exploration. And I'd argue that a comfort, allowing yourself to be comfortable with complexity and esotericism or mystery, provides for a lifetime of exploration. You can grasp the principles of early Buddhism in a month, and then you're just sitting on your ass doing vipassana and shamatha and metta meditation and mindfulness meditation for the rest of your life. That sounds, to me, really boring. There's no unfolding over time. And in addition, there's no giant aspiration, crazy ass big aspiration like the bodhisattvas have. And or like the mystical Dzogchen adepts have, rainbow body. Could I do that? Wow. What does that really mean? What does the practice actually entail? Well, start here. And then there's this unfolding that goes on for the rest of your life. So beautiful. So beautiful. And likewise in Mahayana traditions, there's that kind of exploration again and again. So I wrap up here, and I'm going to bring in Namkal Choga in a sec, who's commented, by saying, there's an old business book by David Schwartz. What's it called? Oh gosh, I didn't write down the name. Thinking Big is basically the summary of it. It's very famous. It's akin to The Power of Positive Thinking, right? He said, the point is this: big thinkers are specialists in creating positive, forward-looking, optimistic pictures in their own minds and in the minds of others. To think big, we must use words and phrases that produce big, positive mental images. And I would argue that the secularists are narrowing down that just by shaving away till you just have a little tiny nubbin, with not of that great, vast aspiration. So let's see now what, thank you for commenting, Namgyal Choga. Let's argue here. Okay, it's Eugene. Hi there. I share your view, but for the sake of argument, can we discuss spiritual bypassing? Yeah. Perhaps some initially run towards the Dharma for the bliss of it. Yeah, I've done some of that. Have you? There isn't, the bliss is highly overrated. I think some people it's easy to attain. Me, it hasn't been the main feeling tone of my practice, but it depends on your constitution. So spiritual bypassing, what you're asserting here, and I'll bring in your second comment next, is that spiritual bypassing, which is coined by the late John Wellwood of San Francisco, a psychologist who observed that people were getting into all sorts of pie in the sky kind of spiritual paths in order to escape from facing their emotions. I agree, it is an issue. And is that more likely to happen in faith-based, devotional, traditional Buddhism than secular Buddhism? Probably, but you know what comes to mind? LSD. Because I keep hearing about these people getting really into hallucinogens, or whatever they call them internally, psychoactive substances. So I feel like maybe they're finding something is missing. that we naturally have. But maybe you're right. Maybe there is a bigger risk of that. And I think it's something that a good teacher and guide trains us out of as the years go on. Finding a good one is hard, though. So yeah, the downside of that big picture thinking, the giant aspiration for fantastical accomplishment is, yeah, you could just, dump your wife and kids and head for Crestone, throw yourself in a retreat cabin, and, pay no attention to your mother. Is that also bad? The way that's bad, besides it's harmful to sentient beings and our connections, because we aren't connecting genuinely with people in front of us. But the other way it's bad is it's bad for us, because I feel that unless we can identify what's really going on with ourselves emotionally, we can't transform it. We can't liberate it. That's not everybody believes that, but I believe that based on my experience. So let's see here. So you're continuing Namgyal Choga law. I've seen so many of them, completely unaware of what they're engaging in. Oh yeah, very esoteric tantric empowerments. They grow less esoteric when you actually start doing the practice, don't they? I'm much less of a mystic than I once was. I saw this, people talking. I went to a talk about the rainbow body recently. A wonderful organization down in LA was sponsoring great teachers talking about it, without talking about what you have to do in order to attain rainbow body, which is, devote your life to yogic practice, basically. Not dabble in something. And so over time, you get more grounded, I feel. Even you can. Or you could fly, if you have a lot of money, you could fly from one empowerment to another all over the world. This is less so. Don't you think it's less so even before pre-COVID? There was an era in which it was a thing to fly to Europe and all these places and get these high empowerments from these great masters and then not do anything with it. This is not, it's fine. Having faith, actually, having faith in my worldview that those great lamas could appear to you and guide you in the bardo after you die if you really felt devotion towards them. So, any other comments before I go? As usual, I run over about 10 minutes. My half-hour talk is usually a 40-minute talk. Thank you so much for coming, showing up here live. Always inspiring to me people actually show up at the time of the live stream. But they do stay online afterwards. Please, it really helps me if you like and subscribe to my channel. You get to certain thresholds, 1,000, 10,000, etc. followers, and they give you perks. I'm not talking about money, but that makes the whole process easier. Thank you. Bye-bye now.